Anytime we have a quorum.
Okay, thanks, Daryl.
Yeah, if we're ready, whenever we have everyone we need.
And then it's bigger about the.
Really good, yeah. Oh, here, you want to sit right down? I was trying to think, I can sit over here too. I was trying to think.
Here.
Where would you like for us to sit?
Daryl's online and I
Oh,
have
he
to
is,
be
okay.
all set because of the
Yeah.
flood. So anyone who wants, come on up, welcome.
Guess we could scooch around.
Lots of room.
Somebody might grab them like where they'll sit when they present.
Oh, gotcha. Can you grab the door real quick? Sir?
He is. Since it's a public meeting, we will be.
Oh, okay. Propped open, okay, that's right.
It's something with HR, it's time sensitive, so I just put it out there about 1:30.
Okay, are we ready? Are we ready to go?
Ready?
Okay, let's call the meeting to order. Audit Committee meeting of December 14th, 2020, or I'm sorry, February 14th, Valentine's Day, 2025. Introductions and notices. Let's see, why don't we do who's there at who's physically at the county offices and then the Zoom people second.
I'll start. Aaron J, now at Risk Management for the Keys County.
Chuck Fadley and the Justice of the Peace.
How do you do?
Crawford County Administration.
Elizabeth Pape, County Internal Auditor.
Nick Lelak, County Administrator and ex officio member.
Summer Steers, I'm a public member of the committee.
Bill Anderson, public member.
And we have guests.
Okay,
Heather Keisner, Public Health Director. Janice Garceau, Health Services Director.
Hill County Administration. Controller and Finance.
Bill Ken, County Treasurer.
Dee Holcomb with Community Justice. And 2 Powers.
That's everyone in the room, Daryl.
okay, so let's now we'll go to the Zoom folks. I'll start. Daryl Parrish, public member.
Joe Healy, public member.
Lee Randall, county staff member.
Jody Birch, public member.
Tony, public member.
Okay, that's everyone, isn't it? Okay. Let's see, Elizabeth, any notices or changes to the agenda? Anything?
We're all set.
Okay, let's get into, sorry about that. The minutes from the meetings of December 6th and December 13th. Start with December 6th. They have a motion to approve. Any comments, questions, additions, subtractions?
Commissioner Darrell, move them on.
And Judge Bailey. Seconded.
Okay, all those in favor of the December 6th minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the minutes of the December 6th meeting are approved. December 13th, do we have a motion to approve the meetings for December 13th? I'll second it. We have a motion and a second for the minutes of December 13th. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the minutes of the December 13th, 2024 meeting are approved. Internal audit reports, first one being the public health integrated audit presentation.
Well, our biggest integrated audit to date was with public health. I would like to start off by thanking Janice and Heather and all their staff for being so accommodating. It was a large scale audit, especially with using our integrated model. But with their help, it went very smoothly, and I thought we got through it pretty quickly. So thank you very much for your support with that. Some background for those folks kind of new to public health. Our public health division currently is structured into these four focus areas, or you can see here. Our public health division, like many public health agencies across the nation, but operates very much on a feast or famine cycle. Next one. And that's what I was kind of catching there with this thing. You can see kind of pre-pandemic, everything, staffing and sections and things were fairly flat. But as this public health emergency got underway, and then a lot of funding came in for that to address that through public health, you can see the large ramp up in staff and sections to try to address the emerging risks created. While all that was going on, I also tried to focus on the fact that we had quite a bit of transition there. Kind of 4 different sections that you can see there, including an 8-month vacancy in that area, kind of right there at the height of not only the staffing, but the amount of sections that they were trying to use to address the pandemic. And then you can see at the end there, right, as we were just getting the audit kicked off, that public health was again trying to right size as some of those funding pools were drying up, and they were trying to address the business model that. So like most of our integrated audits, we focused on these 8 risk areas in the business and answered our audit through field work. That's the next slide. Yep. Did our interviews and checklists, looked at the information systems at hand, looked at some best practices for public health as a whole, and we did find some areas for some improvement. Our main one that we took off the part of it was the employee evaluations for the division were not being completed. At the time of the audit, the division had a higher rate of incompletion than the county as a whole, but you can see the county as a whole is not doing a great job either. When we looked into the cause for these high incompletion rates, managers and supervisors were doing a great job checking in regularly with staff. And consequently, they were undervaluing the significance of the formal annual thing. They considered addressing any performance issues during their regular check-ins to be sufficient, and writing an annual eval to be kind of duplicative. Another cause for the incomplete evals is the county's own evaluation process, which was in flux. In our 2019 audit, we could see that the completion rate there was pretty low, 32%. And now with this 2024 statistic that we pulled up, where it's nearly half incomplete. In 2019, HR's response to our audit was they were going to roll out some new evaluation tools to help managers and supervisors complete this evaluation a little bit more streamlined, with some streamlined forms. And a little bit more best practices current evaluations, but as of the time of the audit, that still hadn't been anticipated at the time for a May 2025 rollout, but now we have some vacancies in HR, so that might be delayed as well. So ultimately, the formal annual evaluation is a requirement under county personnel rules and most union agreements, regardless of the frequency of informal conversations and the inefficiency of our evaluation programs. So we recommend that public health managers and supervisors complete the required evals and ensure that expectations are set for future completion. And public health agreed in their response, and prioritizing completion of overdue evals, setting expectations, establishing an action plan, and providing trainings on how to use those informal check-ins to then draft annual evaluation.
Aaron, by overview, this year, we're not going back and.
We didn't look at back. There were, of course, during the pandemic, they were trying to prioritize where they were spending their resources, right? So evals were suspended during the pandemic so they could focus on the emergency. But, now we're past that. And so, yeah, the overdue were just this last fiscal year is what all we looked at. Or calendar year, calendar year. For the next one, we looked at performance measures. Any of which are mandated by their funding requirements. We looked at their measures that were that public health inputs on the BOCC dashboard, the annual reports that they post on their website, and the published quarterly communicable disease reports. When comparing public health performance measures to GFOA's standards, there were several instances when the measures deviated from best practice. Relevancy, measures are mandated, which generally is reflected in more output related rates like immunization rates in Central Oregon. But outcome measures which link measures to division goals were fairly limited. GFOA also wants useful measures, meaning that they support decisions and improve understanding. Measures on the BOCC dashboard used overly complex language, and some measures were consistent have not been addressed through a change in any strategic plan. And then finally, measures should be collectible. And as mentioned, the measures were kind of broadcast across multiple different platforms, making collection and interpretation pretty time consuming for anybody that was interested in it. Heather told us pretty early on in our audit process that she had intentions to update the strategic plan for public health. So part of that planning process involves identifying measures that ensure that any of those strategic plans. So our recommendation was that public health improve reporting by developing a one-stop shop, aligning the measures with the new goals of the division. Management in this case mostly agreed that new measures would be aligned with strategic planning, but did not fully agree that a consolidated kind of one-stop shop dashboard would be feasible. So they're relying on the accessibility of their website and accepted the risk that this approach may limit collectability to public interested stakeholders. And then when looking at fiscal procedures, we found some inconsistencies and incomplete procedures, although a lot of good practices were there in place. We made 2 recommendations to improve controls. The first one kind of addressed the gaps in the procedures that you can see there with the usage of some mail procedures. Management agreed to close those gaps. And then the second recommendation promoted alignment of the practices currently in place with the procedures. There was some misalignment there, and they agreed that they were going to update all those procedures in the next 6 months. One detailed area of fiscal controls that was a repeat finding from our 2018 cash handling audit. These cards are purchased by the division to promote engagement or lower barriers, lower barriers to access, like gas cards and things like that. And we found some inconsistencies listed here between card logs and internally performed counts. The unaccounted items were unable to be completely explained due to kind of lack of records and transfers among the different programs. But we recommended that policies be reviewed to reinforce accountability practices for those gift cards. And they have a really good, robust policy. It just wasn't being fully walked through all the way to the end there. Management agreed, and we'll start meeting with the custodians of those gift cards to review the policies and procedures. They're going to ensure that independent counts happen in January, which we're past. And review program budgets monthly to monitor the and usage. And then finally, with information systems controls, we found some data inconsistencies within the organizational chart when compared to the division records. And this could have contributed to some of the missing employee evaluations noted, but we couldn't directly correlate this as a cause. We also weren't sure if this was anomalous, right, or a systemic issue. The division reported that they had finding these types of data errors for some time, but lacked any data to support the extent or frequency, which kind of led us to our recommendation that they try to understand how pervasive these errors are by kind of establishing a tracking system. And then management decided in this case to accept the risk for this recommendation, stating that they communicate regularly with HR on errors and that the issue is not theirs to own, correct, or apply resources towards. To the improvements, we also made several observations for public health. They complied with all the contract management rules, recently updating their procurement procedures to align with current laws and policies. The grants that we reviewed all met compliance and reporting requirements. And the division already had plans to improve physical access into their Courtney Avenue clinic by adding touch signage to assist visually impaired clients and improve the website accessibility as part of the website overhaul. But unfortunately, since the report was issued, we found out that the county website redesign has been suspended due to the impending fiscal constraints. So that's it. Again, I want to thank Heather and Janice for being so courteous and warm and welcoming. Those sentiments were echoed all the way through. There was not one staff that didn't respond very quickly and promptly to any of that. As usual. So again, thank you. And open up the floor to you. Any comments or that you'd like to make? Any of the report or the audit process?
I think what I would like to say is being somewhat fairly new in this position the last 2 years, that I found it actually really beneficial to have this done and to really look at our processes and where we can improve. And specifically around the performance and making sure that working with our teams to make sure that we are doing those evaluations. And so we already talked about it on manager meeting, and we now have every manager and supervisor and has one of their goals is to complete all performance evaluations on time. So those kind of processes have been really helpful for me as a leader coming into this post-pandemic, really trying to right size and refocus on strategic methods, evaluation, feedback, all of those things that I think we did a really great job of prior to the pandemic and then went into reactive mode. So, but it was a pleasure working with you on it.
No, I mean, I don't have a lot to add. You guys, we've done a lot of it. So it's been helpful, even if painful at times, it's helped us illuminate. But the other thing I would say is some of the comments that you were relating from managers about evaluation, I think are probably a 1 or 2 off. I don't think it reflects health services in general. So I think there's some folks that have been there for a long time and were under different management, different training and expectations around the importance of evaluations, but there's no for that. And the other thing I would say is managers are often scrambling if they have 12, 13 direct reports to get them done in time. So sometimes they're showing up and it's not done when in fact they're late. So I always count late as pretty good, considering that there were periods when they weren't done at all. So, but it was actually really helpful because it helped us identify one program that's important is to actually evaluate staff regularly. So, yeah, it was a positive experience.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions, committee or in general?
Just a quick comment, on the performance evaluations, I certainly appreciated that it was compared to county aggregate data, because that's a concern to me. When I see that, Tom Anderson had a directive, or it came up, or I can't remember what the context was, I wasn't of course in this position he was, but we were behind then.
Yeah.
So I don't know what's happened, so I appreciate this update, so I'm gonna work with Eric and Whitney in their capacities as Human Resources Director and Manager to understand where those are, and then for the departments that we oversee. Of course, I don't have operational authority or control over offices, but the departments that we see, and so I appreciate the data being included so that we're on alert as well, so that we get those up as well. Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure to add that in context, right? It's not just a public health issue. They're really the county is backsliding, continues to backslide on those evaluations for staff, so.
Can I just
Good.
add, I've been here long enough to know that we process, because we're still operating under evaluation forms designed by Bob or his predecessor, and they don't feel relevant to staff. We have to do a lot of extra work to actually make them directly relevant to the work our staff are doing. So they can feel pretty onerous when they don't feel meaningful, and meaningful evaluation is a really positive, fun thing to do with staff, and they appreciate it, but we don't have that right now. So I know that there was work being done on core competencies that never got finished, on a new evaluation form, and I just hope when there's time that we do that work. And we're willing to help, like, we've always been willing to help design.
Thank you,
Yeah.
and thank you for recognizing that Human Resources is underwater. We haven't had a director since last September, or a
Yeah.
manager since
Yeah.
manager beyond the interim roles. Whitney, I don't know if you want to make any comments about where that's at. I think I saw that was, but let me just turn it over to you.
HR to pilot the new design of the performance evaluation project, and that work was completed in December. We got that feedback formally from Community Justice. That's a project that we put on hold due to current staffing, but a priority that we plan to have for the new director, and I think was in our initial recruitment materials for that director as a priority project. So certainly really grateful for them for all the work that they put in, and also for Jenny Hoffman and Tanya's support to get that integrated into maintenance. So I think we're making good progress there.
Thank you, and I don't want to miss the other piece that I can't remember what Heather or Janice said. I do also appreciate those managers and supervisors, directors that have more than 6 or 7 direct reports, which is what the best practice is. And often we do have staff that have 8, 10, 12, and it does become demanding. So I don't want to dismiss that. It's just that it is important and to support our employees by providing on-time, accurate, and the best possible evaluations. Thank you.
Anything?
Oh,
Anyone?
the next one. Next one.
Thank you so much. Okay. Move on to the next item, that is language access presentation.
So this is the presentation on the language access program audit. Overall, we found that the county language access requirements, but better coordination and guidance within the program was needed. So this is just some background on language access within the county. We don't have a huge population of people who don't speak English and who need assistance, but there is some. There are 3,243 people within the county who speak Spanish. Also speak this map outlines sort of how all people who speak English less than well is that's the term the Census Bureau uses to identify them, how they're distributed across the county. So we used as our criteria some rules and best practices. The rules are based on Title 6 of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which permits national ordinance which has been found to also include providing information only in English, when it's important information that people need access to. The U.S. Department of Justice has also put together a language access and assessment planning tool, which is what we use to identify best practices in this area. Our audit objective was to determine whether the county complied with rules related to translation of services, whether services were effectively and efficiently provided. So in order to determine that, we reviewed the processes that were in place at the county for providing language access. We looked at data related to expenses and vendors and also staff, because there's bilingual staff who are also used as a resource. And we compared all of that to criteria. This slide, if you go with your meeting packet, it has a link that as criteria. That's the Department of Justice's language access tool. Findings and recommendations. So our first finding is that there was some risk of non-compliance with federal rules, and this is based on the county's status and the services it provides and the population it provides those services to. So the rules apply based on access standards. And those are based on the size of the population, and the population of people who speak Spanish in the county is higher than the threshold for needing to have a program in place. The frequency of contact. So if you're seeing someone on a daily basis, you have a higher standard to provide language access than if you see someone infrequently. But there are certain areas of the county where people do have quite frequent access. Services, health services. The importance of the service. So, it's more important to provide language access to services which are matters of immediate health and safety than it is to provide optional or less important services. And then also available resources the federal government takes into account. But based on the size of the county, they probably wouldn't give us a waiver based on available resources. In order to do one thing we noted was that the county had not assigned anyone responsibility for the language access program. It's assigned in policy to deputy county administrator. We have 2 deputy county administrators. Neither one had been formally assigned responsibility for this program, and management agreed to. The second finding was that the policy that we do have in place doesn't provide clear guidance. So the language access part of the county's policy is within its broader Civil Rights Act policy, which is GA 16. The authority section of the policy did not apply specifically to language access definitions, some terms related to language access undefined. And then maybe one of the main problems with it was that it assigned accountability to programs instead of to staff. So the county or programs were required to provide language access rather than staff. We made a recommendation that administration should update the Civil Rights Act policy to provide clearer guidance and include best practices. Talking with them, we talked that it could either be updating the Civil Rights Act policy or additional policy related specifically to language access. That would really be up to them how they wanted to address it. They've agreed and plan to have that update. Okay. Another finding was that we didn't really, as a county, know what was needed regarding language access. Access. Needs were based on outdated census data. Census data can be problematic in defining language access needs because there's sort of well documented instances where people who do need language access are underrepresented in the census, both just by nature of having a language access barrier itself, and then also maybe being of a community who has less trust or desire to interact with the government. There weren't good financial reports out of the financial information system related to language access. There was no really good way, there were no codes within the accounting system to identify translation, interpretation. I think there's a code for interpretation, but the translation code was sort of spread about. So we ended up having to kind of estimate the amount that was actually spent on language access based on vendors, and it wasn't really a good reliable number. There was an accountability for who was required to provide language access. There wasn't a whole lot of training for staff related to language access. The language access policy and procedure talks about providing training in Spanish. It doesn't really talk about how to provide language access. There's not a notice to community about language access, and the plan did not include a plan for monitoring or evaluating the program. So we recommended that administration create a language access plan based on the language access assessment and planning tool, and they agreed to do that.
So are we only talking about Spanish here?
Not so small enough that we don't need to proactively provide documents translated in advance. For Spanish, we do because the population is high enough. So if we identify a document that's vital enough, we should be proactively translating it, having it available in Spanish. But the requirement to translate is regardless of what language people speak. And so that could be on demand. So offering on demand interpretation to do that. Which leads us to the next finding, that documents weren't necessarily available and that the contracts for interpretation were underused. Departments had not really established consistently guide or procedures and how to identify those documents that really needed to be translated to Spanish ahead of time. The contracts were sort of where a single vendor might have contracts with two separate departments. There are also contracts with different vendors that addressed the same things. And then the county, sort of recognizing this problem, had gone through quite a large procurement to identify a vendor, but no one has used that vendor in the 9 months that contract has been active. And so this is an example of a county-wide procedure for language access that's put out by Washington County, telling people within the county when to translate documents and how much to translate, but it actually goes into a lot more detail, really guiding staff of what's available and what they and how to provide language access services, which the county doesn't have. This is one where administration disagreed with us. We recommended that they develop a manual to guide staff in how to implement language access policy. We talked about how, as we were talking about this recommendation, that there are different, the activities are so different in different departments that maybe it doesn't make sense to have a county-wide procedure because it would look very different amongst the different departments. But one of the things I pointed to was our financial policy 7, which does have a policy and then gives guidance to departments on how to implement mostly revenue collection procedures with some degree if something doesn't work for them, they can get an exemption. So that was sort of the model I was envisioning. Administration, this, you know, in the report, they decided to accept the risk. I think they're open to it and still considering it, but didn't want to
So you just said they did or they didn't want to?
They did not want to commit to it at this time, but it's still something to consider. As a result of not having clear procedures in place and policies for departments to follow, bilingual employees we spoke with really felt burdened by by the demand for language access. To assist with other agencies, so law enforcement was, asked to deputies within the sheriff's office were dispatched based on their language availability to calls that might have otherwise gone to Ben or to the state police. Some people had higher caseloads based on their language access skills, so because they either had to carry an extra caseload because they had that population, or population itself became an extra, a larger caseload than other people had. Colleagues often would request help and assistance from their bilingual colleagues rather than using contractors, both because there was sort of discouraging for the expense and also just because it's easier and have relationships with people. One person that I spoke to was really upset and saying they were considering declining. The demands were so great and not commensurate with the stipend that they were being offered. And then another thing we found was that the stipends weren't consistently tied to skill or need. So there was different levels of stipends, but not consistent across the county, what it would require to be within one level or another. And then also that the stipend amount doesn't change with inflation. So it's been steady for maybe a decade or more. It's really symbolic and maybe doesn't really reflect the value that these people bring to the organization.
Is there somebody in the room that kind of give us information if it's really been around that long, for a decade?
Or at least 8 or 9 years that we've had a stipend that I'm aware of, maybe longer, and it is the highest level that now. Which is.
Yeah, prices have definitely gone up just a little
Yeah.
bit. last year.
Did you say it's like $50 a month?
It's $250 a month if you're at the highest level. Meaning you're able to translate documents, which is a skill. And
But you can't do it through Google Translate?
No, you cannot. I have German family. I use Google Translate. Let me tell you, it's not adequate to any kind of technical.
Especially like in health.
Okay. It's a great way to save staff time. So sometimes we'll use a platform to translate a document, but you have to hand it to a native speaker to actually make sure it's meaningful and the person on the other end will get it. The other thing with Spanish speakers is you may have some folks that speak indigenous dialect or other ways of engaging with the Spanish language because of where they come from, because they don't all come from this. So you just need some level of sophistication.
And medical Spanish.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we have staff who have Spanish as a first language and are still struggling to pass the tests that have a very high threshold for ability to translate complicated technical information. And for people accessing services that actually matters, like if you're signing a service plan or getting medication prescribed, you don't want someone winging it. Just saying, I would.
But that technology could improve.
Now, and we would always have a native speaker review a document just to make sure that things like Ben gets translated into a bend in the road. So if there is a local element to translation, that we just can't get with AI. But we'll get closer.
So we recommended that administration create a policy specific to the bilingual program that clarified selection, hiring, and testing expectations, and to implement that. That is all of our presentation, so you can open it out if, I think Whitney was the most involved, and also Nick, if you have a response, and then any questions from it.
Just as Whitney comes up, I want to say, I just think this was an outstanding audit. It was just it was, you know, as the administrator, I don't know what I don't know, and this, but it told me what I don't know. It just, our first meeting talking about what you were initially finding to the final report, it's just exceptional. It's incredibly informative. We have a lot of work to do as our response indicates, and I'll let we talk about the details of that if you wish. It's a great roadmap, what we need to do and with timelines. So I don't want to steal any more of your thought. You want to?
No, I
Sure.
would just echo everything you said and thank Elizabeth for her work on this. This is an audit that administration requested. Because this is an area where we've seen some departments like health services do a lot of work, and we've seen other areas of the organization not quite, you know, moving as quickly, but we know that it's a need in the community and it's important to us. So I think that this audit and the resources that Elizabeth was able to share with us really put us on a really great path to move forward and enhance the work in this area. So just thank you, Elizabeth. It's really been helpful and great to work with you.
We accepted the risk. It is on page 17 of 36. If you can have a chance to look at our response. This is we have mandatory countywide procedures. What we stated was we agree with the auditor that consistent procedures are important, but and Elizabeth, you captured this well. But we want to evaluate the development of countywide procedures and their potential operational impact with department heads before we make a determination about absolutely. As we know, health services does a lot of work in this. And our departments are just so different, from our solid waste department to our elected official offices to health services. It's so different. So we're really committed to implementing this audit. Yeah.
I think the audit provides a really good roadmap on how to how to address the issue. Anything else?
I'll go ahead and ask a question if it's okay. This is not intended to be a political comment in any way, shape, or form, but the county has made some changes on its policies regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm just wondering if that overlaps with this audit at all.
Really convinced that we, as an auditor, don't speak. We reflect the values of the elected officials, and the work that we do reflects the values of the county that speaks through the elected officials. In this case, these are requirements that we're required to meet. The federal law says you have to provide language access. So I would think that those kind of changes would impact the requirements the county needs to operate under. Federal law can change as well. So.
I remember how hard we worked though during COVID to make sure that the information we were giving out was in English and in Spanish. I mean, that was something really important that we did. And I know we were trying to find like bilingual people to hire. It was like a half-time position, and like you could never find a half-time person. So, but you're saying we only have 4 people in the county that actually have this capacity?
That have the highest level. So it's I think there's about 50 plus minus 50 employees that have the 150. Something like that.
50 have the 100, the lowest level?
There's really 2 levels, but it's actually somewhat complicated due to employee bargaining agreements.
Yes.
There's some slight differences, but I think the simplest way to say is most staff that have a stipend of $150 a month.
Okay. Sorry. And that's really not adequate because it hasn't been updated with the budget.
That's a very reasonable statement, yes.
Okay.
Has there been any survey or any inquiries into other organizations as far as what the stipend is for them? Is there any?
Elizabeth actually did some work in the audit that she was able to share with us about what comparable organizations and counties do and how they set those rates. And I think that was really helpful to us. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, I just wanted to respond. Health services, we do still have a committee that is focused on diversity, equity. At the moment, we still have one. That committee does matter to providing language access services, in that it is in a way to support staff and being able to come forward and talk about what it's like to work as a staff and provide his services to families. And it's helped us. We will say that during COVID, the language access services that were provided very much in response to a local group of Spanish speaking staff from all of the medical providers who got together and said, you're not doing enough for our community. So advocacy matters, however it happens. And I think it's going to keep happening regardless of what it's called. So again, I don't want to wade in to a decision, but we'll need to keep talking to our Spanish speaking community one way or the other.
All right. Anything else on the language audit? Okay, let's move on to the next one, elected sheriff transition.
For my last act, I present the elected sheriff transition. So this one was on our audit plan, pretty early on. Sheriff Nelson announced not be seeking re-election. So that kind of set forth a number of different things. Well publicized race for the open seat, which is ultimately won by Sheriff Kent Vanderkamp during the November general election. The next one. So one of the longstanding issues that Sheriff Nelson talked about during budget committee and board county commissioners meetings was just the staffing challenge that they had within their deputy ranks. And then recent data shows that they may be turning the corner, but they still have had double-digit vacancy rates for quite a while, especially in that corrections deputy position that's so critical to inmate care. Again, each transition is kind of fairly templated, similar to our integrated audits. For this position, we had some statutory requirements that we had to look at, but the other 6 elements, there are best practices for transitions and succession. And again, we answered those through field work and made some observations. The sheriff's office transition planning put in place under Sheriff Nelson was effective. The plans actually exceeded GFOA standards by adding several best practices like inventory management, continuing existing policies.
Do we have slides?
Yeah.
Oh, are they?
Yeah.
They're back.
Oh, you know, I redid it and you may have not got the most current version. They're at the end. I reorganized them, kind of, there we go. Yeah, so there we are. Transition planning was effective. Go on to the next one. The transition plan also ensured compliance with Oregon statute and responsibilities between sheriffs. And if you want to go back to findings and recommendations, sorry, I changed them around a little bit.
It makes us pay attention.
Yeah. So when we looked at procurement, we looked at 8 of the 10 highest paid vendors. We reviewed, followed purchasing and procurement rules, but we did find some exceptions there. The supplier used for deputy uniforms was paid over $175,000 using individual purchase orders, and lacked a contract for specifically for uniforms. That same supplier had contracts with the sheriff's office for some specialty law enforcement items like body armor and gun sights, but uniforms actually represented more than half of their total spend that fiscal year with that vendor. Additionally, the vehicle outfitter used by the sheriff's office didn't have any contract or purchasing agreement in place while they were paid overtime for their power services. Those services were paid using split payments, keeping each invoice under the county thresholds and concealing the total value of the spend. Sheriff Nelson said that this was due mainly to a training issue and that there was no malicious intent there. After the audit began and the office became aware of these items, they immediately started working with the county procurement manager to get some contracts in place. We recommended that the SO review all the vendors for payments and make sure procurements were being contracted as needed. We also recommended that they immediately formalize contracts for those two specific types of services, for the uniforms and the vehicle outfitter. The newly elected sheriff agreed and said they're updating their processes to regularly review payments and providing some procurement training as needed. And next one, the Central Oregon Law Enforcement Services is an oversight agency for the Central Oregon Drug Enforcement Task Force Code, combining the resources of local law enforcement to counter illicit drugs in our community. At the time of the audit, Kohl's, which is the oversight agency, was 2 years delinquent in their mandatory financial audits. In the fiscal year 22 audit, our external auditor, Moss Adams, had acknowledged their audit impairment, getting timely financial information from the sheriff's office, and suggested that county finance take a more active role. County finance did attempt to increase their involvement with the sheriff's office through the business manager, but those offers were basically ignored. Sheriff Nelson said he was never directly contracted by Moss Adams or county finance to discuss the financials. And the business manager was placed on leave during the time of the audit, so we never could actually discuss anything with him. Our recommendations were continuing those financial audits completed. The newly elected sheriff agreed, stating that the completion was a priority. I think we just received fiscal year 23 Moss Adams financial report. Yes, so anyways, they can now start moving on to fiscal year 24. No,
They finished, they got all the information to them.
Yeah.
oh, so the,
Draft is almost ready.
Okay.
for review.
okay, I heard otherwise, okay. All right. Yes,
They have made progress. They got past the big barrier.
they got past the barrier of actual information.
Yes.
Good, all right. So late financial audits for Kohl's was also found in the 2015 audit when Sheriff Nelson took over. So we recommended that the new sheriff consider some alternative strategies to make sure that this doesn't keep falling through the cracks. Sheriff Vanderkamp said that he was assigning staff to the process to get current before July. Really only time will tell if this will be effective. County Finance offered up several solutions that they could try. Sounds like he's gonna just keep going his way. So we'll see if they can get into compliance with Oregon budget law.
So can I ask if the business manager is still gone?
They just posted his position, so I believe that that is open now.
Maybe Commissioner, we can just talk about it offline.
That's what I was wondering.
No,
That's a good question.
didn't have any impact.
What are the consequences of being behind in the Kohl's audits?
There is no punitive piece for Oregon budget law, other than they just basically post that you're late or not complying with some of the meeting rules and requirements for posting and noticing budget meetings, things like that. They basically just note it. There's not really any.
Yeah, there is there was something that follow, because under Oregon budget law, there was it as an exception to Oregon budget law, but then it says you have to follow these ORSs, which then are just another handful of similar rules and regulations that we follow as a county, but it's not as strict. And so there has been some like, oh, we don't have to follow that, but that's okay. Thanks.
The two recommendations from the prior cash handling audit in 2022 remained unresolved. The records unit was still not using the county's financial system to record daily transactions. For Next slide there, yeah. Or use those records to balance daily to prepare deposits. The next one, also, to try to better get us transparency on code, and prepare those Coles audits, was for the sheriff's office to provide finance with bank statements monthly from code, so that they can journal the activity of those accounts. Sheriff's office at the time of the audit was still not providing those monthly statements, that they agreed to. So the recommendation was just to prioritize completion of those outstanding audit recommendations, and Sheriff Vandekamp agreed, stating that completion was again a priority, and that exploring those into cashless transactions, which may provide a little bit more fiscal control, but doesn't necessarily address the recommendation. That's it. Any other questions for Sheriff's transition audit?
Just, I guess from my own like understanding, so what, I don't know, consequences is the right word. What happens if they don't? I mean, so who's the authority to make them or strongly request or make changes besides just kind of seems like maybe ignoring is kind of what's going on?
Yeah, again, there's not really any punitive measures in any of the Oregon budget law that they can get fines or sanctioned in any way. It's more of just, yeah, publicizing the fact that they're delinquent and not compliant. It's one of those areas where it's like, they're kind of key to Oregon law.
There's a board that oversees Coles, and I suppose if they start to feel that they don't have faith in the financial management, they could request that another partner agency take over financial management of that. That might be a potential consequence, but it would be up to the Coles board, which is made up of law enforcement leadership within Central Oregon.
Thought on the bid splitting and the making large purchases without a contract, but those are, I mean, those are fairly potentially serious issues. Is everyone satisfied with the response on to that?
Yeah, I was satisfied with their response. I think the fact that they brought in the procurement manager pretty quickly into the process to make sure that those were looked at, and then the agreement to kind of go back through and comb through their vendors that they spent any of those other areas where they're using either POs, recurring POs, or split purchases under thresholds to kind of analyze it on their own, to figure those out. Again, we didn't have the bandwidth or the resources to look at their whole, fiscal year spend. We just took the top and noticed some anomalies there. So I think their response is adequate. I think they're going to do a good job with it.
This might be something we need to look at a countywide level. Procurement manager, but she's still new and hasn't had a chance to implement her entire programs. We also saw this issue at the clerk's office where they were performing services without contracts, and also that was something we had commented on in the past. So it does seem like it might be a bigger issue than just the sheriffs and the clerks, and there might be some countywide controls that could assist with.
And I just see significant exposure, potential exposure there. Either legal exposure, other potential problems as a result of that.
It may also be that Sheriff Vanderkamp has prioritizes fixing some of these things that took place under a previous leadership as well. Did you get that sense by chance?
Yeah, I mean, I think during his campaign, he made it pretty well known that his business experience was going to weigh heavily on his staff. So that also kind of, at least from my perspective, gave me a little bit of comfort in that area as well.
Just a little bit?
A little bit. I mean, you never know.
Right. What you do and what you say, right? Yes. I know, I would hope that his financial expertise would really come into play, because he said that, they're spending way too much money. Yeah, when you saw the, what was it, the golf cart and the brand new tires on. That was brand new tires.
Our sheriff and undersheriff aren't with us today at the meeting. I met with them recently, and I think there would be concerns if there wasn't agreement that these were issues that needed to be addressed. I have absolute confidence that Sheriff Vanderkamp and Under Sheriff Wells are committed to addressing these and a whole lot more with the sheriff's office. We had a really, really great meeting a few days ago. And I have complete full confidence in the sheriff's office and the direction that they're going to begin to address these issues and more.
I've also know that the sheriff had reached out to the finance
Thank you.
directly and asked for help. And we have been providing them a lot of assistance since we started, and because obviously they're a lot of business manager right now, and so just making sure that everything keeps flowing properly. But yeah, helping our team, helping their fiscal team whenever they need to, even if it's simple advice.
Thank you. If you weren't able to hear, that was Jana Kane in our finance department. And I should have mentioned that myself, is that I'm aware that the sheriff's office is working very closely with finance. This identified a number of issues. There were a number of just procedural issues that previously weren't being followed, that they are now in very close coordination with the finance team. So thank you. I'm sorry, I see you.
Good. All right. Anyone else?
Yes, hello. I had a question around, and Elizabeth, there might not be time capacity, but is this an audit that we kind of, bump up the follow-up report a little bit? It looks like most of the deadlines that were, in the management's response are, May, June, July, kind of strike while the iron is hot, and hopefully these are closed up and resolved. And we could, wrap this one up and then also communicate and be able to show that the, progress was made and it was made quickly. But I don't know if there's time in the work plan.
The work plan, so yeah, we don't necessarily have time in this year's work plan, but as we're putting together next year, so that would be sometime in June, or July, which is earlier than we normally would get out there. Also want to give them time to actually implement the recommendations too, so. But yeah, that's something we can think about.
Slide, the vacancy percentage. It was like maybe the first slide or second. But it went back to like COVID.
Yeah.
And I'm curious about
It was
if
the last five years. It's supposed to
Okay.
look.
Yeah,
The
so
last 5 years.
pre-COVID, do you know what it looked like?
We didn't pull that far back, so I actually don't have that data.
Especially with a report on labor, it might be helpful to have that, because it could just been, 16 or 18 for a long period of time before this. I don't know.
I haven't worked here. I've worked in other places with law enforcement, and I think that it's been a long time that staffing has been a challenge in law enforcement. So I think since 2010, that's been hard.
I think Sheriff Nelson's comments were something regarding that even for the past decade, it's been a challenge for him to fully staff, which would indicate that even prior to COVID, they were having a hard time filling all their positions.
But I think aren't we invited to a ceremony with like 11 people, like maybe the next week or
A
so?
week from Monday on the 24th, yeah.
Yeah, because so I do think, we've had the musical chairs, like to Sun River, and then Sun River is going to Redmond, and Redmond's coming here, so we've had the really good news is, I think a lot of really strong law enforcement people are staying in our region. They're just changing their base. It's really nice to know.
To start with the next presentation, Daryl. We can't hear you.
Here we go. It's time for the global follow-up. Sorry about that. Had the mute on.
All right, so this is the time we present with you our global follow-up, and then this year we added an annual report to our global follow-up to so here are the statistics of 2024. We issued 31 reports, 209 recommendations, 146 recommendations were resolved, 63 remained unresolved, and we had a 73% four-year resolution rate meeting. Recommendations, 73% of our recommendations went to implemented within 4 years.
Mhm.
It's hard to put
It's a D
quantitative.
minus, what do you
C,
think?
solid C,
It's hard to put
C?
quantitative
73.
require or analysis on these because one recommendation is not necessarily the same as another, and there's some things take a lot of work.
Where is that number historically? That percentage? Oh, sorry.
So one of the things we look at is reader satisfaction. We're down a little bit from our historic levels, which was 92%, but above our target. We were completing audits faster. Our audits took on average 4.2 months to complete compared to 5.73 on historic averages. Here's how our four-year resolution rate has changed over time. Historically, we were at 95%. Our target is 75%. We're just below that. I think part of it is also changing what we're defining as resolution. And I started a program where we actually require departments to give us at least some basic evidence that they had actually implemented. So if we recommended a policy, we wanted to see the policy. If we asked them to do a risk assessment, we wanted to see the risk assessment. Prior to that, David would just, whatever, you know, if someone, they would just say, this is resolved, that would count as resolved. So I think that might have something to do. So now moving on to the global follow-up. One of the things that we wanted to do is highlight for you all areas and recommendations that we thought were worth taking note of. So an area of success we saw was with the cybersecurity recommendations related to cybersecurity, IT. They were in our highest risk last year, our things we were most concerned about, and they really put it together and related to cybersecurity. So we wanted to celebrate them. The highest risk that we're highlighting this year is related to the wage equity audit. We see that there's risk there if employees are feeling that their wages aren't fair. There's also legal risk if there are any biases within our wage structure, financial risk because people can also sue us and compensate them. As we'll talk about next, though, in our wage equity follow-up, administration is pretty well on the way of implementing the wage study and hopes to have that done by the spring. And then we have the dinosaur represents the long outstanding recommendations that have just been sitting there, not done for a long time. So there's recommendations related to mobile devices that I think we made in 2017.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. So updating the policy related to mobile devices and also the compensation or the reimbursements related to mobile devices. So those are still outstanding. And then also some recommendations related to P cards and how the MUNA system administers P card facilitates P cards. And those, I think we're waiting on a new vendor for those. This is the progress we saw by audits. So we can see where things have moved and where recommendations have moved and where recommendations haven't moved. So the gray ones are ones that have been resolved prior to the 2024. Each square represents a recommendation. The gray ones were resolved prior to 2024. The blue ones were either but the red ones are ones where there was no progress made. So you can see some of the big ones that no progress was made. Again, there's still some P-card outstanding recommendations. The pandemic investigation and contact tracing recommendations are mostly related to temporary staffing, and those were directed to HR. And then also some vacation and sick leave recommendations. Also, I think. And then you can also see the sheriff's office cash handling recommendations, which we talked about. Transition audit.
Jenna, are you talking to the sheriff's office about cash handling then?
Yes, we just had, Judy pass. Our property tax side, she went out there and did some training with them in December on cash handling, just to look at their processes and. About it, and so, yeah, I worked with Jessica Vanderpool out there.
Yeah, Jessica, yes, who works in the jail.
Yeah, so Judy went out there and did a bunch of training with different groups out there.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, good. So it won't be red, maybe.
Yeah, I think Jessica's slated to have all these resolved by like the end of this fiscal year.
Oh, good.
Yeah, by June.
This chart is showing the average monthly resolution unresolved recommendations by department. One of the things that the average months to resolution, you can see that the higher ones that are above average are finance and information technology. That shows ones that have been resolved and how long it's taken to get those resolved. The unresolved ones are the ones that they're not contributing to that. Those averages, their average is 18 months. It takes, or the average unresolved recommendation is at 18 months old. Finance is unresolved are a little higher, 39 months. Sheriff's office also has higher ones, 24, and human resources.
So it's basically the same thing as saying it takes 18 months on average to resolve a recommendation.
No, that's the one on that's the resolve. The one on the right side is how old are all the unresolved ones that are out there. So though it's taken finance 19 months average to resolve a recommendation, the unresolved recommendations are on average 39 months.
Are those primarily related to the munis transition?
Yes.
Is that why they're?
And those are those P card recommendations.
Some other data that's included in the report, if you want to go and look at the full report, how often we adhere to our work schedule, coverage over departments, over time, how often we've touched different departments with audits, our staffing ratio compared to how much staffing we have compared to county staffing, and then also detailed recommendations. Questions on our global
Questions
follow-up?
on the global follow-up? A lot.
Well, I had one more question.
Yeah.
What was your assessment of the 73% average 4 years resolved?
I don't know, we used to have a benchmark, National Association benchmark that number, so we compare it to that. And I think that's where the 85% is our benchmark.
Yeah.
So we're below the benchmark. I do think, yeah, I wish more recommendations were resolved that.
So just for some context, GFOA, you know, also makes thousands of recommendations every year.
The GA.
Yes.
Thousands of recommendations every year. Their historic completion rate was 80%. This year they dropped down to 75. They're having a harder time getting those recommendations resolved at the federal level as well. And so it's kind of interesting, the fact that we kind of saw that drawback as well. Like, we're just getting harder, whether it's the types of recommendations that are being made that are harder to achieve, or maybe just
Budget.
It could be the
all
pandemic
kinds of
also.
environmental.
I remember talking about evaluations, the annual evaluation. I remember in 19 when I was here, because I know when I worked for like the CPA firm, they were really good at that. Every year you got your evaluation. For sure. And in 19, it was a problem. And okay, so we had 19 and then COVID happened in, let's say, like March of 2020. So it was a recommendation, and yet it's never really seemed like it's gotten the support by people that need to be doing it. It seems like it is important, and don't you always need documentation? It would make things a lot better. So, Nick, the ball's in your court now, right? With evaluations and explaining to people that no. Yeah, like, there's really no excuse. Everyone needs to have an evaluation this year by what? Is it by calendar year or is it by fiscal year?
It's their anniversary date.
Oh, anniversary day.
Yeah.
Their
Okay.
anniversary, yeah, employees, yeah.
So everyone's. Those letters, like the 5 and the 10 year, so, okay.
Yeah. Our human resources is very good with giving us an update every month on reminders, and so it's our responsibility to respond.
So I learned something more.
We only had one follow-up this.
Wage equity.
That's on the wage equity audit. So just a kind of reminder of where we were when we did the audit. There were wage inequities at the county, at the countywide level. So non-white men earned 90 cents on the dollar compared to white men. White women earned 80 cents on the dollar, and non-white women earned 72 cents, 73 cents on the dollar compared to white men. So that the higher level, which required more looking into why those were occurring at the individual employee level. We also saw that there were some factors that could be influencing that were not covered by law. So overtime is something that influences disparities in wages because women work less overtime than men, and so really you can see that the right side or the left side, sorry, dyslexic. The left side is showing the base wages just based on salary, but when you take overtime into consideration, you can see the women both move back down and the non-white men move up. Another factor is job sorting. This is the situation whereby this chart shows the for any job with more than 10 people at the county, the percent male and the hourly wage. And so you can see as you move higher onto the percent male, the wages move higher as well. So the jobs that have more men pay more than the jobs that have more women. And then the final factor we noted that because as you work at the county longer, you earn more money. Each year up to 7 years, typically you get a merit increase. And see that non-white women, 55% of non-white women leave the county within 2 years of employment compared to about 25% for the other demographics we looked at. So this is how we are reporting out on them. Resolved means that management has addressed the risk. 2 of the recommendations were resolved. 3 are in process, meaning they're working to complete them. In no cases did they accept risk in the audit, so there's none in that category. Our first recommendation was that the county should conduct an equal pay analysis. They're conducting the analysis. Done, run through the spring of 2025. Initially, the completion target date at the time of the audit was for March 2025.
And that's still relevant, isn't it?
Still going on, yeah. We also recommended that they report results of that once it was complete, and they say that they plan to once it's complete, so same sort of situation. Report it when it's complete. We also recommended that after completion of the equal pay analysis. Well, we said they should update the personnel rules. They said they would wait until getting advice from their consultants after the equal pay analysis. So that again also had a target completion date of March 2025. We recommended that human resource update their own procedures to include salary review from Wood's office. That's 1, 2. We have done that. Also recommended that they update the equity review procedure. They add the equity review procedure to the supervisor toolkit, and they did that. The next steps are that we'll continue looking at those outstanding recommendations, reporting on them in our global follow-ups, and hopefully this will be done by December when we report on that. December. It's on the wage equity audit.
Questions, comments? Looks like the study's underway. That's good.
Do you have any updates on the study?
So we broke the study into 2 parts, and the first part is the organ pay equity analysis, and the consultant has made really good progress in that phase 1 of the project. We're just completing the final stage of phase 1, which is pretty significant, so I don't want to sort of minimize the work that's going to be involved in that. But we're really pleased with where we are with that. The second part of the project is going to be the market analysis that is going to be conducted as part of this project. And that has been work that is ongoing and will continue alongside the pay equity piece. So really working closely with the consultant and also with the steering committee. We have a steering committee for this project that's made up from representatives across the organization that have an interest in this work, and their insights have been really helpful to us along the way. So making good progress.
Good. Anything else? Okay, thank you. Move on to the next item, in process and upcoming. Got
Pretty self-explanatory. The alcohol sales audit. Maybe last time we spoke, I had talked about putting that project on hold to wait to do observations at the next county fair. With our staffing changes and just also some different understandings about ownership over cash and inventory, decided that we didn't necessarily need to do observations, so went ahead and moved into reporting on this audit. Working on that now, and I expect that will be coming out in March. Also kicking off the sheriff's office body cam and auto cam audit. I've already met with the sheriff and the person who oversees that program, Lieutenant Brian Husband. Been talking with the DA's office on how they use the sheriff's data. I'm trying to reach out to some community members also to understand their perceptions of risk and benefits in the program. I'm also doing a ride along next week, so see those body cameras in action. I don't think The 2025 election controls audit, met with Steve to talk about their processes. It's a lot, very complicated. Trying to wrap my arms around that and doing a lot of research. That one I'm also trying to reach out to community members. So you suggested I reach out to the parties, the Democrat, Republican party heads, groups like League of Women Voters, to find out more about community perceptions on risk related to elections. And then into it, there's also copies back there that just sort of outline where we spend our time in the past.
You know, you said you're evaluating alcohol sales. So from like 2 years ago, I said really they need to have non-alcoholic drinks at the events. Like I've been to an event a couple years ago and I could not find a non-alcoholic drink. And you know, it's really kind of like a big business and a lot of places have gone with. I mean, they could have significant sales too, because some of those things are really not very cheap. So I'm hoping that you'll see some non-alcoholic sales too.
That didn't end up being in scope. And so the audit report will comment on that. That could be something you ask Jeff about if he's.
But yeah, because I kept saying to Jeff, you've got to have something for people that is a bit more safe.
Even though it's on the water act the same sales points where they sold alcohol, which was a change and actually made it harder for me to figure out the accounting because they account for water separately than alcohol. All right.
Interesting. Okay. Any questions or thoughts about that? Okay. We have special topics. The popular annual financial report.
So we do this every year. This is one of our reports we do to get our Triple Crown every year. So we have the annual financial statements, our annual comprehensive financial report, the ACFR, and then we have our budget book. And then this is the popular annual financial report, 12 pages. It's supposed to be digestible to anybody, even non-finance people. I have one hard copy if y'all want to pass it around. We just released it 2 weeks ago.
Same as this.
Yes, yeah, yeah, that's just like a printed version. Yeah, so our 300-page ACFR summarized into 12 pages. Did y'all want me to go through each section or did y'all have any questions? Happy to run through the report.
I think everyone needs one on their tabletop in their living room. It's really well done.
Oh, it's good discussion.
Daryl, really?
Yes.
We do try to put fun pictures in there of projects that have been completed. Lots of construction going on right now for the county. Negus Court, the Negus transfer station's like pretty much done. And we did our arbitrage report on that, and we don't own even. So it's quick enough. And then we'll keep watching the courthouse because that one's obviously seen some delays, so.
Okay. Anything else on the PAFR?
Any thoughts about whether this would be something to translate to Spanish?
Mm-hmm.
Well, after this presentation today, I think we should look into it.
Just a thought.
Yeah.
We always we don't get a lot of requests in finance. Most of our requests are related on the tax side, which we do translate those documents into Spanish as well.
It is interesting that the assets in millions went up 73 million from prior year, whereas years before that, it was never that big of a jump. So Jenna, what do you say? I mean,
Well, we got 40 million in capital, which is really so that's a big chunk of it. Also, On the pension and OPEB liabilities, we've seen increases on both the asset and liability side. So when we're recording those adjustments, it's the net is going up expense wise too, but our assets on that side that we hold in those pensions and our like retirement, like our county health plan, we have a lot of assets too, so that side's increasing, but then on the flip side, the expenses are also like our liabilities we're having to record. So it's like I could pull up the actuary and show you exactly, if you want me to.
You know, it is Valentine's.
But it is mostly related to those pension and OPEB liabilities. And assets, yeah.
Okay, so could you explain why the PERS for the state had such a poor return? I mean, does anybody look at that, why it's so pathetic?
Yes, we do. We have a consultant. Present us on like what is happening at the state level.
Oh, Robert, do you have some words of wisdom?
Yeah. Actually, Carol Samuels, that's who she's referring to. She's the one who spoke during our mid-year budget committee meeting. Sorry, Robert, you told me for the record. Yeah, they first did discuss at their last meeting, their board meeting, had some comments on that. I'll share it during the monthly update. I don't have those in front of me. But basically, they're invested. And some of their investments are going to be longer term, so it's harder to get out of some of those investments. And so that we may not see some of those returns, but we don't have control over obviously how the state invests at their level.
But as I said, my son's pension
Absolutely.
got returned 16%, and it's, yeah.
And
I'm going like, and I look at this and I'm going, isn't somebody asking the question?
Correct. And
And
those
what, yeah, what did ours do?
that have deferred comp, that is in the. Our interest rate probably is about near 4% right now. Right, yeah, 4%, yeah, so our rate's about 4%, what Bill's investing in for employees.
But we have don't we have incredible regulations on, we have to be so careful, so we don't lose 25 million?
That's right, in the
Yeah.
PERS system, they're able to invest in things
Oh, that's
outside of what we're investing.
Water machines, yeah, I know, we've had a lot of them.
Any other questions?
Anything else? Great, Shannon, thank you. Okay, the next item is the vote on the proposed bylaws. Does anyone have any thoughts, comments, suggestions, additions, subtractions, changes to the bylaws?
Elizabeth, can you walk us through the changes to the bylaws from the previous version? I haven't seen a red line, so.
Yeah, I didn't share a red line. There weren't very many changes. Just kind of walk through. How many? A lot of this is in code, and so that there's. Yeah, maybe. And on. Things like we changed. When it was capitalized. Yes. Thing that we've been back and forth on, whether it's half or 2/3 of a majority or 2/3 majority vote to remove a member from the committee. I added something here about conflict of interest. Department head members will recuse themselves from votes involving their departments, including the adoption of the audit work schedule.
So the 2/3, was that the change? Was that what it was before?
It was originally 2/3, then it went to majority, simple majority, now it's back to 2/3.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Were there any changes in Article 3?
No, because that is in code. And if we want, well, we can also. We want to, but.
I didn't change anything here on that.
So when we, was it the last meeting, I think that we went over some. Finalized all the changes we wanted to make, and all those were changed, all those were made.
Mhm. I believe so.
I'll make a motion to approve the.
Please,
revised
question.
files.
Lee, ask a question?
Lee, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wondering if this had been through legal review yet, or if there's been a document number assigned to it for formal review.
It has been through legal review. I don't know that we assign numbers because it's not something that county administrator is signing off on.
I mean, we've done that with other documents in the past, just to have a number attached to it for kind of for perpetuity to show that it had gone through legal review. Was there any feedback from legal that they expected to see it in an official routing or not?
How important do you feel like that is, Lee?
Well, and as a department head, I don't sign off on anything that doesn't have an official county document number. And so on one level, I'm somewhat uncomfortable voting in favor of something that doesn't have an official county document number, but by the same token, this is a unique situation. So I'm not sure I feel strongly one way or the other. It's just something I'm thinking through.
Why is it a unique situation?
Well, to the point that was made earlier, that since it's not a signature line, it's the question under GA 17, one of the county policies. I think the general, it's related to legal review. The policy reads something like anything that obligates the county to something will be officially reviewed by county legal. I don't know if it would apply in this instance or not. It's just something that I'm trying to make sure we're aware of, I guess.
Valid question. What are your thoughts? Elizabeth, Nick?
I can tell you that it's been through legal review and you can trust me.
Yeah,
I do trust you. It's more
Yes.
just like formally, do we need to see that?
we talked about it when you initiated this,
Yeah,
I
and
don't know,
Dave
4 or
was
6
here.
months ago, and you said, yeah, you were gonna take it through legal review, you did, I didn't look to see what they said or not, I just trust that you did the work, and I'm not gonna let it know that.
Okay, I'm comfortable with that. It's just, I'm always cognizant of that county policy and making sure that that it's in place, or at least legal has an opportunity to say that it doesn't apply in a particular instance. So.
Also, we're just referring this on to the Board of County Commissioners who will make.
Okay, so likely this would likely, if it's going to go in an agenda for a BOCC meeting, then it would likely get a document number at that point, I would think. So.
Yeah, you think.
We'll have a resolution.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Okay, that actually kind of fully answers my question. Then we're just making a recommendation to the board.
Okay. I had a thought on Article 4, the meeting schedule, Section 1. It's just a minor thing. It says the audit committee shall meet as the committee deems necessary. Should we put something in there about our regular meetings being held every 2 months?
No, please.
Pretty obvious, but if you're the public looking at this, trying to figure out when we meet,
I'd rather not narrow it down if we don't have to. Not specify.
I agree.
Article 4, okay, well. Aren't there 2 Article 4s here?
it's page 2 of 6.
That's why I couldn't find where you were.
Oh,
Didn't say anything about a regular meeting or a special meeting and define the differences between the two, but I don't know if that's important.
Article 4B.
I'm comfortable with it the way it's currently stated.
Okay, no big, it's not a big deal. And then the only other thing I had, it's just it's a thought and it, not necessarily we have to do anything with it. Under Article 3 authority, on page 1, the heading, we use the word, the committee shall advise. And then Article 4 responsibilities, item A, we use the term overseeing. So should we use overseeing in both locations or advise in both locations or just leave it the way it is?
The second one. I think overseeing is applying just to the independent audit. And the advise is a broad range of issues to the board and county, if I'm looking at the same thing you are, Daryl.
Yeah, page 1 and page 2.
And actually, when you get to page 6 and 7, the numbers are correct. So, okay.
So here overseeing the selection of the code here is specific to that function, yeah.
Okay.
Also on background, so that they don't think it's a different committee. Right? Yeah. In the first part of Article 3.
I try to catch all this.
Yeah, spell check's not gonna catch it. And maybe just because it's also in 4C.
Yeah, I'll do that.
I'll fix that. All right. Anything else on that? We need to have a motion and a vote on it. With the understanding that it has been through legal review.
Is the motion to approve the bylaw amendments or approve the revised bylaws? Whatever motion is proper, I make it.
Yeah, which is proper.
Are we just recommending it to the
Right.
county commissioners?
Board, right? We'll actually approve it.
Bylaws as presented.
As presented and as discussed.
As-
Yeah.
I'll second.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second to approve the bylaws as discussed. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, motion approves unanimously.
So somebody told me yesterday when I was chairing a new COAC meeting. It's applying to COAC where we had to have the vote by person for the minutes. Have you heard this, Nick or Whitney? Yeah, that's what,
Like a legislative change.
that's what Commissioner Hemrick was telling me, and so I had to get it on record from each person.
Interesting.
Like something more. So, okay, well, nobody knows about it, so, okay,
So
It's a good question.
yeah, we'll find out, won't we?
Yeah.
I'll make those changes, this this to the document and work with Brenda to get it on the agenda for the Board of Commissioners, and I'll let all of you know when that's gonna be on, in case you wanted to be there for that.
Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, annual quality assessment.
So one of our requirements is every year to do a quality assessment of our practices over the year and share it out with you all. So that's what this is. All right, so this is the requirement. It's in our yellow book that we need to annually summarize the results of our quality monitoring process. So this is kind of a summary of our system of quality control. So the things that we do in order to make sure that our audits are of high quality annually. Compliance statements. We have procedures in place for adopting our audit plan that ensure that it's risk-based and independent. We have minimum qualifications for our staff. We have procedures to document continuing education, making sure that we stay on top of professional issues. We have policies and procedures that outline how we should conduct audits. We index our evidence reports. The statement we make in report is indexed to evidence, and we conduct a second review of that. The person who authors the report, then the person who doesn't author the report reviews that to make sure statements are all supported by evidence. We have a checklist for each audit that we use to make sure we've followed all of our standards and have made considerations for quality of our evidence. This review annually, then every 3 years we have an outside peer review system we use to make sure our audits are high quality. So in 2024, I found that the system was working as intended, that we were producing, we were complying with our quality review procedures. 2 things to highlight. One audit was missing an engagement checklist. This is probably because we are switching our audit software, and I pulled the reports off the old software. Anything that was being worked on at the time didn't get updated. And so that was just a document that I missed as I was doing that process. I went back and did the checklist. The audit met all the requirements. We really no problem with that. Another thing that I forgot to sign my annual independence statement. I signed it in January instead of July. I didn't have any impairments over the year, so there's no impact. But I created an Outlook reminder to make sure that I remember to sign my independence statement in July. I also wanted to talk to you all about the new government auditing standards because prior our standards that in order to have a quality assurance program. The new standards are sort of shifting that around, and they're asking us to take a risk-based approach to quality management, or quality management instead of quality assurance. And I'm not entirely sure how to do that because no one's done it yet, and I've asked for other examples from our professional organization. It's still not happening. The new standards were released. Been out there over a year now. We're supposed to have them implemented by December 2025, and then any audit that starts after that should be following the new system. But I started thinking about a risk-based approach to quality management, also thinking about this because of the staffing changes in our office and how those staffing changes are going to affect our quality management process. Yeah, so that's what this is another risk-based approach. And it's asking us to identify risks based on these areas: governance and leadership, independence, acceptance, initiation, continuation of engagements or audits, how we perform our audits, what resources we have access to for performing audits, and information and communication about quality management. So that's what I'll be working on. And I really, there are sort of 2 areas that I've always struggled how to comply with within a small shop. And so I wanted to kind of just share with you some of those struggles. One of the areas is within supervision. So our standards define supervision as directing and guiding staff in performing work, complying with standards, staying informed about significant problems encountered during an audit, reviewing work performed before a report is issued, and providing audit feedback. With only one person now, there's not really any supervision, as I'm doing the audits and there's really no one to supervise me and to do all of those things. So with a 1-person shop, which we will have occasionally, even, with more people staff. Because we are so small, if anyone's on leave or there's a vacancy, we really only have one person. So instead of having a supervisor piece and experience of the person you have in place, there really isn't any supervision. And that's a risk we're gonna have to accept, as a small audit shop. With 2 people or 1.5 people, there's a little bit of supervision because you can rely on each other to do some of those steps. But it also isn't really fair. As I was rewriting the manual, I kind of wanted to say something like, Aaron, you could be licensed supervisor. In my job description, in order to have really, to really have supervision in the way our standards intend it, you really need 3 people. So 2 people to do audits and 1 person to just supervise and not do audits, but just supervise the other people doing audits.
Is that something that you could find outside of your department or even the county? Other organizations, or just trying to think outside the box, like wondering how that might work.
I'm comfortable with both of those options.
Okay.
You all could guide me towards doing them, but some of the drawbacks, I think, I definitely am comfortable with having someone within the organization do it, because I think that really impacts independence.
Yeah.
Having another audit shop do it, it gives up some of our autonomy and the values that I bring as an audit leader to the function. And so we were actually thinking about doing this for another on the quality review side. And I was thinking like, well, I don't know who I would go to, because I know those other people, and I know that they don't do it the way that I would want to do it. And so I would be giving up some of my autonomy as the audit leader at this time. Decide how that looks. So, you know, I know an employee who works in another jurisdiction who, when I worked with that employee, no one wanted them to do their quality review because they were such a stickler, and it would just take months to even get through review. I wouldn't be supervising that person, so I could say like, that's not the way we're gonna do it. It could be something if but we'll have outside jobs and responsibilities, and I don't know how much you draw on you as well. The second is engagement review, and so that's having a person not involved in the audit, checking every statement for facts and conclusions, to see if they're sufficient. In really large audit shops, you have a team that's just dedicated to other people's audits. In a 1-person shop, there really isn't any chance to do that. So you just do a self-review. And we have lists of engagement steps. I can do all the documentation, take off my author hat, put on my other hat, go through, double check everything. But it's really a self-review. With 2 people, and that's the way Aaron and I would do it. If he authored a report, I would check it. If I authored a report, he would check it. But we were both really involved in the audit throughout the process. I was always supervising the audit. We would meet every week to talk about the audit. So neither of us were really completely independent. I had already signed off on all of his work papers. So it wasn't really an independent review. With 3 people, you can have that independent review where you isolate the supervisor and one of the people would really work on the audit, and then you'd have a 3rd person who hadn't reviewed all the work papers and hadn't signed off on them. So I just kind of wanted to let everyone know that, you know, these were some of the things I'm thinking about as I'm thinking about risk and quality and how our staff expects that quality.
Sorry to clarify, so the the new standards require some level of review or?
They don't require it. They say, we need to do a risk assessment.
Okay.
And then we accept a certain level of risk.
Gotcha. And risk assessment, this is what you're thinking.
Yeah, this is what I'm thinking about, is I'm thinking about how we do this function.
Gotcha, thanks.
And so. That's it. That's all I have on that. Any questions about our quality assessment?
Questions? Okay. Update on the recruitment. Anything on that?
Updates, I wish I had more. So the way HR does it is, they'll just keep the position open, they'll take applications in and they won't review them until the application actually closes. So they let me know that we've had 4 people apply, but they haven't done their review to see if they've met minimum requirements yet, and they won't send those on to me until after they've done that review. But wanted to let you all know that it was still open and.
And when does it close? When does that?
Closes on the 6th.
6th of March,
This is on the 26th,
20.
sometime that week.
February or March?
February.
February, yeah.
Okay. So it's okay. So it's coming up.
Yeah.
I guess it's good that we have applications. That's a good thing.
And then on the review committee Aaron's gonna sit on the committee and Joan and some hard services.
Good. Okay, any comments on that? All right. Other discussion items. We have administrative update from Nick.
Thank you. Just two quick updates. One, we have the Health Services Director recruitment, which is in process and ongoing. And then we plan to initiate the Human Resources Director recruitment here in pretty February. Understanding that they wants to complete before we have a Human Resources Director in place. But Whitney, did you have any other updates to share with the committee? Oh, you did.
I think that's great.
Okay. So that's all I have at this point.
Okay. Any questions? All right, committee information.
Committee information is really just a placeholder for a document that's available to all of you.
Sorry, what was that?
It's just a placeholder for a document that the resource document for you.
Yeah.
That's why it's on the agenda, just so that there's a place for the link.
Gotcha. Okay.
I think there's a handout on that.
Page document we have in the packet.
The other thing I wanted to do was do a toast for Aaron since this is his last.
Yay. Good.
We're gonna miss you, Aaron.
Yay, Aaron, miss you definitely.
We're going to
Thanks,
miss
Joe.
you. We are going to miss you. I'm sure Elizabeth will miss you the most, but we will miss you too.
Real toast. Wow. Boy, you guys on the web are missing out. We got sparkling cider being poured as we speak.
Yes.
We'll call that in a minute. Sparkling side.
Sparkling cider.
It's gonna go, are we getting French champagne?
For sparkling people.
The 2003 Chateau
Yeah.
Beyond.
Yeah.
I don't know what the wine is. Excellent nose.
But do you guys know where to find him? He's in the Kingwood Leads, right, Aaron?
Absolutely.
So go down to Redmond
Thank
and
you.
check it out.
Wow. 13 minutes from my house now.
Yes,
Just amazing.
Oh, now you can ride your bike.
No, I'm not gonna go that far.
13-minute drive.
Aaron,
15-minute
well,
drive.
cheers.
Thank you.
So I wanted to say,
Oh, you do.
I'm really gonna miss Aaron. I've worked with him. Definitely my favorite auditor that I've ever worked with.
Whoa.
And maybe my favorite person I've ever worked with.
Oh.
So he just has been so important to my work. I really have enjoyed collaborating with you. My work is so much better because I get to work with you. And I'm really gonna miss having that, working at risk management. He also, yeah, in addition to just being very patient, as he showed me the ropes and many times, repeating himself on how to run the ropes and how to pay invoices and how to do my time sheet and all kinds of silly things like that. So I'm really gonna miss you, but glad you're still at the county and glad you're at risk management, because I know you're gonna do a great job there and make the county a less risky place. So, to Aaron.
Cheers.
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 Thank you, everybody online.
Cheers from afar.
Appreciate it. Thank you very
I
much.
was thirsty.
It's really been an honor for me. This. When I applied for this job, well, my prior job, I really didn't understand fully what it encompassed. David gave me a ton of guidance on just how big and broad the county was. And again, was very patient with me in making sure that I really took in the breadth of what the county does in every kind of decision I make or Elizabeth kind of hit the ground running with me, and I think we immediately had trust with each other right off the bat. And she's really helped me get even more detailed and really say what I mean in a lot of ways in reports. And so I really appreciate that about you. Thank you very much. And thank you to the administration for keeping me on. Wasn't a position I intended to take, but it's gonna be great. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you on the committee and write some great reports that help the county out.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks.
And thank you as a citizen,
Oh, yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah, that's right.
Taxpayer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah. I see the importance of this function.
Great.
Taxpayer.
And the fact that your presence makes the county a less risky place actually benefits Elizabeth and us all. So
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. Yeah.
we're glad you're still on board the organization, but we'll miss you.
I'm gonna do some big ERM projects,
Yeah.
absolutely, as soon as I get my feet on what the heck claims are.
Get that coop into shape.
Well, I haven't got there yet, then I need to get under, like, my head above water with claims first, but yeah.
What kind of audits can we figure out to do for his group so we can get it back in here?
Small potatoes, small potatoes.
By the way, we can officially adjourn our meeting, I think, at 3:03. So why don't we do that? We'll do that. So if